For visual effects tools, let's start with the hair modifier, which is based on Joe Alter's shaven haircut. The modifier can be added on any object to turn them or part of them into hair emitters. Styling tools help to shape up the hair, and extra parameters can define their stiffness, frizz, and kink. Hairs can also be modeled and animated from splines, which is great for long hairs and French braids. Hair has a dynamic engine for animation that checks for collisions in order to produce very realistic results. Hair can also be used for fur and all sorts of vegetation effects. The cloth engine of 3ds Max also works as a modifier so that any object can be turned into a cloth. Cloth settings are based on fabric types and can be adjusted manually to refine the cloth texture and dynamics. Cloth objects can even be turned into metal for explosion effects like object being twisted by the pressure. Cloth sections can be constrained, they can be made sticky, and they can be torn into pieces if they are stretched too much. Also, objects that are turned into cloth can have internal pressure to maintain their volume. If you intend to dress up a character with cloth, you can start from splines and use the garment modifier to turn the 2D pattern into a cloth-ready geometry. With seams tools and character dressing options, it's easy to build the right suit for your character and make it fit to the body. For particle effects, 3ds Max has a very powerful and flexible system named Particle Flow, or pFlow. pFlow is an event-driven system, which means that you can construct various events that will define how particles will behave over time as they change their state. Events are built from a set of operators and tests, and they are assembled in the particle view window. 3ds Max scripts can also be inserted as operators in order to create all sorts of custom effects. Particles can emit from objects or sub-objects. You can paint areas where particles will be emitted, or you can use animated maps to create animated emitting areas. Then particles can be affected by all sorts of forces, enter in collision with objects and change their course of action, stick to object, or many other effects that you can think of. Particles can be made of standard shapes, or they can use instance geometry in the scene. Exploring pFlow really opens a completely new universe of possibilities in 3ds Max. Particle systems that you create can be saved as presets for further use so that you don't have to build an effect every time you need it. And since version 2010, 3ds Max ships with 100 particle flow presets made by Hollywood visual effects artists that you can use right away in your scene for things like fire, smoke, and water effects. If you are serious about doing particle work, you have to check out a few specialized plugins that have been developed for 3ds Max in that area. Those plugins are not part of the suite, but since they are very popular in Hollywood, it's worth to mention them. CBS has developed Thinking Particles and Volume Breaker. Thinking Particles is a rule-based particle system that can achieve very interesting effects based on rules rather than events like in pFlow. This means that particle effects are done without any manual keyframes, so that any change and iterations in the particle system are very quick to operate. Volume Breaker complements the particle tools by creating fragments from scene objects to turn them into particles. TurboSquid also offers two very popular plugins for particle effects. Afterburn is a volumetric particle shader that can be used with any particle systems to make them look like fire and smoke. Fume Effects, on the other hand, is a fluid dynamics engine designed for simulating and rendering of realistic fire, smoke, explosions, and other gaseous phenomena. Both tools are developed by Sidney Satke and are used on many movies that you have seen this year. Again, those plugins are found at CBAS and TurboSquid and are not included in the suite. Back in 3ds Max, there are two systems in 3ds Max for dynamic simulations. First, Reactor, that has been in 3ds Max for a few releases now, and that can be used for ropes, water surfaces, soft and rigid bodies. Second, since a few weeks only, and only on the subscription program, we have added GPU-based physics with the PhysX engine. PhysX offers great rigid body simulations right in the viewport for all sorts of collapsing objects or constraint-based systems like ragdolls.